It's the morning of one of Tottenham's most important games of the season, and I'll be honest, I am worried about it. The injury crisis seems to have no sign of abating, and Bournemouth will fancy it in a night game at their tightly atmospheric stadium. I'll give my thoughts on Ange's quotes from the pre-match press conference, and I'll let you know about credible reports of Spurs wanting two incredible European players this January. All this and more on today's Spurred On podcast. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening as ever. Please do give this video a like. Press subscribe if you're not a subscriber to the Spurred On podcast. I bring you daily Tottenham Hotspur news, and as we get closer to the transfer window, I'll be doing daily transfer updates as well. You can also become a member. Just £1 a month really helps me make this daily content for you. All the details of how in the description box below. But let's get into it. And Ange Postecoglou yesterday first gave an injury update on the Spurs crisis. Mikey Moore, he says, will hopefully be back by the turn of the year. Ange is refusing to allow speculation on what the illness slash virus is that Mikey Moore has suffered with. But I've said from the start, worried that it's glandular fever or, even if it was COVID, then you'd think now he'd be back and fit. He's a young, healthy boy. So unless it was long COVID, which I don't know if they can even diagnose at this point, then Ange has asked us not to speculate, but it's hard not to speculate, isn't it? Because he's such a talent, and really missing him at the moment when we've got so few options in the forward line. Meanwhile, Archie Gray recovered well after taking a knock late in the match on Sunday. Looks like he'll be available. Dominic Solanke did train yesterday, but is not 100% according to Ange. He did say, however, he's improved, and let's just hope, fingers crossed, that Solanke can play against his former club tonight, because we missed him so much. No shade on Son Heung-min, what an incredible player, but he really is a left-sided forward rather than a number 9, and Solanke has improved us so much this season by just being able to hold the ball up in the final third and allow us to keep pressure on opposing teams rather than let the ball keep coming back at us, and that was what was happening against Fulham at the weekend. Christian Romero, again, not available, looking on course apparently to return to training early next week, maybe Friday, but of course that is a day too late for tonight's game, so it will be Ben Davies and Radu Dragusin again. However, I've been impressed with them. I've talked about them in this week's podcasts. They look like they've got a good balance together, and hopefully they can pull off another great defensive performance tonight at Bournemouth. It's not going to be an easy game by any means. Ange went on to be asked how many players he would like to buy in January, and he said this: "It's a bit tricky, and a lot will depend on what happens in this next 3 weeks. Who we get back in that time, where we sit with the health of the squad at the beginning of January. January's a tricky one. I wouldn't expect us to do too many significant things in January, but if January 1st we're in exactly the same position we are now with 9 players out, I reckon we'd be doing something." So look, I can see, I can almost imagine what a lot of you are thinking at home listening to that. Just that all you'll hear is Big Ange saying, "I don't expect us to do much of significance." Well, listen, I just want to temper any negativity towards that. Let's face it, January is a very, very difficult time to buy. Clubs do not want to be selling their major assets during January, and if they are willing to, it will be at a huge markup, unless, of course, you're looking at players whose contracts are running down in the summer, and therefore clubs might be potentially interested in getting a fee for the player rather than him going free in the summer window. So, for instance, when Christian Eriksen left Spurs, that was in January, wasn't it? Because he was running down. I think Daniel Levy managed to get about 17 million from Inter for him. That ended up being a good deal for both parties. So don't be too distressed that Ange has come out and said, "I don't expect us to do too much significant business." However, there is another angle to it, of course, which is if Ange were to come out and say, "Yes, we're going to be doing loads of business," then clubs will immediately be like, "Oh, well, Spurs have money to spend. Let's put our prices up." So that's another angle to it as well. But he's right as far as I'm concerned. With 9 injuries at the moment in terms of players who would literally be involved in every first team game and probably get minutes on the pitch, we are really, really struggling. And as I've mentioned a few times, maybe that will mean that the club and Daniel Levy will have to bring some of that budget forward from the summer to January to help us out in a similar way to how he did when we brought forward the signing of Pedro Porro. Bought him in January with a loan to then sign on a permanent deal in that summer. Ange Postecoglou was asked on whether he wanted a bigger squad. He said, "It just depends. A bigger squad with just numbers? No. A bigger squad of players who are able to contribute is more important to me. I don't think we had the capacity to do that. With 3 transfer windows into building a team, a squad, and a playing style. So I think we'll get to that point, and that's what we need to keep reinforcing, where we have a squad and a group of players who can compete in the elite European competitions and domestically. Some of this year has been important. We've had soft tissue injuries, obviously, and we've got 3 at the moment, but we've had Vicario, Romero, and illnesses and suspensions. You can't legislate for it. They always happen, but you just hope they spread out more than they have for us. No doubt we've still got work to do with the squad and the team, which I don't think would be surprising to anyone. So I think the key takeaway from that is Ange has always been consistent, and I love this about him. He doesn't want to just bring players in for the sake of it. It's got to be players who are going to be suited to the style of play. And that brings in another difficulty when it comes to getting players in January, which, not only is it about, are the clubs willing to sell? Are they willing to sell at a fee that is acceptable to Spurs? But also, are they exactly the right players for Ange Ball? I wonder if the Johnny Cardoso Real Betis deal might come up this January, because of course we got a kind of first dibs deal on him when we sold Giovanni Lo Celso to Real Betis back in the summer, and that is one where they could potentially go to Real Betis and say, look, we've got this first dibs deal on him, we'd like to bring potentially that transfer forward from the summer. Cardoso is of course a number 6, he could help us in that central midfield role. And maybe Betis would be willing to do that for a little bit, maybe just a few £1 extra than the money that we've agreed to take him on if we do exercise that first choice deal. So that's one to look at, I think. In terms of what Ange is saying about bringing players in, it makes sense to me. I think he's being very careful with his wording in these press conferences, because he knows that anything he says that isn't on the right messaging, that doesn't give the right optics, will be reported on by the press. Other clubs will look at it, agents will look at it, and the amount that agents and clubs are then charging for players will go up. He was asked specifically, Ange, whether Spurs need more quality and numbers in attack. He said, there's no doubt that we need to continue bolstering that front third in the next couple of transfer windows. Well, that brings up, doesn't it, whether Timo Werner has a future past January at the club. I would say right now, let me know what you think in the comments, I would say that Werner has to stay for the rest of the season. Obviously, he put in that really incredible cross for Brennan Johnson's goal at the weekend, and without that, we would have lost that game. And in terms of numbers, I think we really need him. I know a lot of you might be disappointed because you think we should let Werner go back to Leipzig and buy somebody else instead of him, but it's just not quite as simple as that. And with the amount of injuries and suspensions and everything we've had, I think we've got to keep him. And went on to be asked about his strikers and a possible need for more depth again in the forward line. He said, with Richarlison, it's been frustrating because I see the potential in him. And to be fair, when he's been fit, he's always made an impact, for me anyway. I think back to when he came back into the team during the end of last year and he went on that scoring run. Even the few games he's played in this year, he's made an impact. Dominic coming in has been great, but we can't overload him because ultimately, even if he stays fit and nothing happens, performance will inevitably drop if his energy levels drop. So it's nothing we're not aware of and need to plan for. So it's something we're aware of and need to plan for. Listen, I have to say, Dominic Solanke and his unbelievable pressing and his endless energy and work rate is fantastic for Tottenham. But yeah, as Ange says, that will lead to a drop in performance levels if his energy levels, kind of in terms of his ultimate stamina for games, drops. So we do need to look at what are the options in helping Dominic Solanke out in that 9. And Richarlison, it's a really difficult one. I like that that Ange has given positive words to Richarlison there, but I think it's fair to say we were looking to move him on to Saudi Arabia in the summer. They were willing to spend a fee that we would accept of about £60 million, getting our money back. And it was Richarlison himself who decided not to go there. And unfortunately, I love Rishi, but it does look like a shame for Spurs at the moment, because the reality is, just like it was with Giovanni Lo Celso, great players, but we just don't get them on the pitch enough. We don't see them enough, and therefore they're not helping out our squad enough. And if we'd had that money in for Richarlison, I think potentially we'd have another player in the squad now who would be able to help us during this time of difficult injuries. Ange Postecoglou was then maybe bravely asked whether thoughts that Son Heung-min may be finished are warranted. He said this: "I would be wary about doubting Sonny, but if you want to, go for it. It might help me if you write him off." Yeah, I think that's fair enough from Big Ange. Every time everyone said that Sonny's legs are gone or that Sonny's spent or that he's finished, he comes back with a brace. So let's just hope, even though I talked about the, at the beginning of this episode, how worried I am about this Bournemouth game, let's hope that Solanke can come back in the 9, Sonny can come in on the left, and there's some space in behind Bournemouth as they come at us, and Sonny can maybe make the most of some chances from the wide positions. Brennan Johnson also did an interview this week. He was asked why Spurs are struggling for consistency. He said, "It's a number of things. Physically, how hard we work, how hard we run. In these games, like Crystal Palace, Brighton and Ipswich, we definitely did drop off in those areas. And we've looked into that and how we can attempt to prevent it from happening again." He said, "When we play the way we did against Manchester City and also away at Man United, it shows us what we really can do and how we can play. But then losing games like Palace and Ipswich just becomes even more frustrating. None of us want to lose or see drop off in our performances. So it's something we have to look back at, really analyse and think about how we played in certain moments so we can improve on it." Yeah, wise words from such a young kid. He's reached 10 goals in all competitions so far this season. And considering how much stick he's had from fans, really, that is an incredible return. He's an elite finisher. He's elite at getting into that back post. And he's a really excellent crosser when he gets in down the right. And he has a player option across the front of the box as well. So listen, those things are not to be sniffed at. Sure, at the moment, there's more that Brennan Johnson can add to his bow, like more strings to his bow. But I think that will come as he grows into Tottenham Hotspur as a more important kind of hierarchical player, by which I mean, as he stays here for a number of years, he will become more like one of the main men in the squad, the go-to guys. And as that comes, his confidence will continue to grow. And then I think we'll see him using his pace to really run at players, like more kind of one-on-one from standing starts. That's kind of what we don't see from Johnson a lot at the moment. But I do think that will come, and he's a very exciting talent. Just a couple of bits of transfer news from David Ornstein, who's of course a very reputable journalist, says that Jonathan David has been offered a new contract by Lille. He's the exciting forward who's been on Spurs' list for a long time. Says that his representatives are listening to proposals and setting out expectations for interested other clubs, and there are opportunities for him to move to the Premier League with Spurs, kind of among the top of the list of clubs who really rate Jonathan David. So keep an eye on that. He would be a perfect kind of Richarlison replacement, to be honest, in the long term, because he plays a lot of games, very fit, very talented number 9. Also, according to Ornstein, Spurs still among the clubs looking at Nico Williams. Now, for me, the Atletico Bilbao star and obviously the star of the Euros with Spain in the summer, for me, he must have got out of Tottenham's range in terms of the money that we can afford to pay. But maybe Nico Williams is looking at clubs and thinking, I want to be an absolute main man at a club somewhere and really make a difference. And there is no doubt that he could be that player. And if we were really properly looking at a long-term replacement for Son Heung-min, thinking that maybe Mikey Moore might be more of an 8 or a 10, then Nico Williams would be that player. So I don't know, it just interested me that David Ornstein, who doesn't really talk about clubs and players unless there's some reputable, some definite interest there and some, a definite story there. Really interested me that this week he talked about Nico Williams and Tottenham Hotspur. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Just in terms of tonight's game against Bournemouth, like I said, I am worried about it. But what I like is I think at home, at the Vitality, that Bournemouth will come at us, and that should leave some space in behind. So hopefully Tottenham can... they should have a bit more energy in their legs than they did against Fulham at the weekend because they've had 4 days rest now. Obviously, we're really struck down by injuries. So in terms of fatigue, there might be some issues compared to Bournemouth. But if there's some space in behind, then maybe with Sonny and Solanke and Johnson up in the forward line, hopefully we can just do enough to try and find a win and then go into that Chelsea game at the weekend. Chelsea are on unbelievable form. Hopefully go into that Chelsea game at the weekend and spring a surprise. Okay, guys, thank you so much. As I said, please do subscribe to the channel and also follow me on the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Go there, type in the Spurred On podcast, give me a follow and a subscribe. And with a difficult game tonight, come on, you Spurs.